it turns out there's really only two things that I teach the parents. And for most cases, that's enough by itself to reverse the anxiety.
All right. What are those two things? Or do we have to pay you to get you have to be your client?
Yeah.
This is the best of the week on Relevant Radio.
All right, here we go. Welcome to the show. It is good to be with you this evening. Listen to Marriage Unhindered with me, Doug Hinderer, licensed marriage and family therapist here in Illinois. I am excited today because I've got an outstanding psychologist that's going to join me, Dr. Johann D'Souza. And we're going to talk about the challenges of raising an anxious child. And you know what? Even if your child doesn't meet the definition of an anxious child or the clinical definition, all children experience periods of anxiety as they go through their adolescent and teenage years. And I came across a couple statistics today. I mean, over 30% of children age 12 to 17 struggle with anxiety. 30%. 21% report an anxiety symptom in the past 2 weeks. So, 1 out of 5 kids is dealing with anxiety now. So, it's a big deal in our society, and I think it's only gotten worse. COVID made it worse. Social media, computers, screens, all of that stuff has made it worse as well, right? So I'm very pleased to introduce to you all, once again, Dr. Johann D'Souza. I mean, his CV reads, it's very impressive. He's a research affiliate at Harvard, someplace called Harvard University. Dr. D'Souza, welcome to Marriage Unhindered. Welcome back.
Thank you so much, Doug. It's really a pleasure to be with you again and to speak to your audience. I'm excited for today's show.
Anxious children. So can you kind of just flesh that out, kind of frame it out for us? How big is the problem? How does it show up? What are you seeing in your practice?
Yeah, well, as you said, it is huge. And the statistics on this are well reported by Jonathan Haidt of The Anxious Generation.
Yeah.
In fact, you can go to his website, theanxiousgeneration.com, and under resources, he has all the stats there in these graphs that show you the inflection points. 2009, 2010, advent of the smartphone and social media, anxiety spikes for the younger age groups. And then we get another spike, as you said, with COVID. And it's amazing. You can see how the age differences, the 15 to 25-year-olds, how, the sad thing is, most people don't realize this. Young people used to be the happiest age group. Internationally, historically, many studies, young people were the happiest age group, which makes sense. And now, believe it or not, that graph has flipped to where the youngest people are the unhappiest. So it's pretty sad, but there is hope.
Well, yeah, and it really is. It really is sad because, at that age, you set patterns that could affect you the rest of your life.
That's true. Right.
And, in the old generation, or I guess maybe in my generation, but, we were really happy kids, which meant we were able to weather some of the storms of adolescence and adult or young adulthood. Now, if you're starting out anxious, man, it gets so much harder to navigate like real world stuff, like how to find a job and pay bills and stuff.
And we're seeing that. That's why the young men are facing this failure to launch crisis, where they're not getting jobs. They're not even going to school. They're literally living out of their parents' basement, addicted to video games.
Yeah, true. And what a sad thing that is. And what kind of a future is a young man going to have when he can't even motivate himself at the age of 20 or 22 to be a productive, contributing member of society and pay his own way, right? And came across this statistic earlier, but women now outnumber men by a pretty fair margin as college students. Women are going to college in large numbers, and men are, you're right, they're sitting at home in their parents' bedroom playing video games.
You know what? The parents have a large part to play with that, for good and for bad. So sure, they can accommodate the children so that they have these terrible habits. But on the other hand, there's a lot of hope because the parents' behaviors, just by changing the parent behavior, that is enough to heal child anxiety.
All right. Say more to that. I'd love to hear more about that.
It's an amazing treatment. It comes from the Yale Child Study Center, Dr. Eli, I think it's pronounced, Leibowitz. So he has a great accessible book for parents, written for parents. It's called Overcoming Child Anxiety and OCD. Okay. So this is one of the premier child psychology clinics in the world, really. And he has this program treating child anxiety just by working with the parents. And I had the privilege of being part of one of the research studies at Baylor College of Medicine to implement this. And then I did a full workshop with Dr. Leibowitz himself to get that training. And it's amazing how effective it is. Out of all the treatments, I specialize in research-based treatments, especially for anxiety. And out of all the treatments that I've implemented, this one is by far the most effective.
Wow. I mean, that's high praise, and a lot of the treatments that are out there that you and I are trained in don't have they have a lot of theoretical support, but not a lot of empirical support or research support. So when you come across a treatment protocol that's got empirical evidence that it works, that's a pretty big deal.
Exactly. And the great thing about this treatment is how simple it is. I mean, it's almost too much to believe. It's super effective. It does not take long, and it's very simple. It turns out there's really only 2 things that I teach the parents. And for most cases, that's enough by itself to reverse the anxiety.
All right. What are those 2 things?
Okay.
Or do we have to pay you to get you have to be your client?
Yeah. You get the Hinderer discount.
Oh, that's good. Okay.
There's one thing that the parents are doing that they need to stop doing.
Okay.
And then there's another thing that the parents aren't doing that we're going to encourage them to do.
All right.
Okay. So what are the parents doing that we want to eliminate? This is called parental accommodations. An accommodation is anything the parent does that helps the child avoid anxiety. So that could mean doing something for the child that the child should be doing himself.
Yeah.
Like, for example, calling the teacher to talk about the homework assignment. I mean, you're a father, I think a grandfather, if I'm not mistaken. You've probably seen how common this is. So that could be an accommodation, or letting the child get away from not doing something he should be doing. So maybe the most egregious example of this is letting the child skip school because of anxiety or because he didn't finish his assignment or something.
Yeah.
Then it can also be subtler ways, maybe less expected, by giving reassurance. So this is where people get an aha moment. Well, reassurance, I thought that was good. Like, hey, it's okay. You're doing good. You can get through this. It's not a big deal. It turns out that reassurance is actually weakening the child's self-confidence, because the child is now dependent on something outside, on the parent, in order to feel like he's strong enough to get through it. Yeah. So actually, reassurance is a form of accommodation that we want to eliminate. All those accommodations are things that ultimately we want to eliminate.
I love that. I love that. And I think, they used to talk about, the helicopter parent, right, who just kind of hovered over their kid to keep safe. Now they talk about the Zamboni parent, right? And that's the Zamboni is the machine in the ice rink that smooths out all the ice. So the Zamboni parent is out ahead of the kid, making sure that there's nothing in the way to trip the kid up. And
that's a great image. I actually have not heard that one.
Is that right?
I love that. Yeah, that's exactly it.
Wow.
That's exactly it.
You try to protect this kid. And my personal opinion and my experiential observation from raising 9 children is one of the best things that your kid can do is fail. You really want them when they're young to fail, so they realize that ain't the end of the world.
Exactly. Yeah. So you said it. There's a couple things that happen. One thing is they realize that failing is not as bad as I thought it would be.
Yeah.
The other thing that happens is they get used to the discomfort until eventually they just stop feeling the same level of discomfort. It's kind of like when you're public speaking. I mean, now you're a renowned radio host.
I don't know about renowned, but yeah, right.
And it gets easier over time. I mean, I'm sure the first time you were on the radio, you were a little bit nervous. Now, how many shows have you spoken live at? You're just not as nervous. Maybe sometimes you're even bored. That's what happens as we do things repeatedly.
Right.
And that's why eliminating the accommodations, the children get more confident, less anxious over time. So that's the accommodations main thing. That's the thing that the parents are doing that we want to get rid of. Now, but then you ask, well, what do I say when my child expresses anxiety, which inevitably she will?
Yeah.
So then now we get into what the parent can be doing to support, and this is called a supportive statement.
Okay.
So it's pretty simple, but people get tripped up. So I'm going to walk through this. So the idea is you provide a supportive statement, which includes 2 parts, empathy and confidence. The empathy is, I see this is difficult for you. The confidence is, and I believe you can do it. So the supportive statement sounds like, I see this is difficult for you, and I believe you can do it.
Yeah, that's good. All right. So we're going to take a call real quick. We're going to go out to Orange, California to Virginia. Hello, Virginia.
Hi. Thank you for taking my call.
Very happy. What can we do for you?
Well, I have 7 children. My youngest is 6 years apart from the next oldest, so they're all adults except for her. She's 14, and she washes her hands obsessively to the point that, like, her hands are scaly on the backs. She looks like she's got something atrocious, and I can't get her to stop no matter how much I tell her, like, only wash your hands before you eat, or your hands aren't dirty, you don't need to wash. She's just constantly washing, and she will grab, like, napkins or paper towels to touch things. Another thing I've noticed is, like, she won't go to confession because she just feels like she's not sorry enough, or she's not going to remember everything. Like, I feel like she has anxiety, but I mean, other than that, she seems
excellent,
pretty normal, pretty much like the other kids.
No, this is wonderful. I mean, a lot of kids struggle with this, so I am so glad you called in. Dr. D'Souza, what do you have to say?
Sure. So, Virginia, good to connect with you. So what you've described so far are 2 typical symptoms of obsessive compulsive disorder, which you can look at as a type of anxiety disorder. Actually, OCD is my primary specialty. So what the 2 symptom domains you've described, the hand washing, those are called contamination concerns, and then subsequent washing. So that's like probably the most well-known symptom of OCD. And then the other thing you said of the hesitance to go to confession because she's afraid she hasn't prepared it well enough, that's called scrupulosity, which is the fear that God is mad at me or that I'm doing something immoral. And the behavior that corresponds with scrupulosity is typically like excessive reassurance seeking, or excessive checking, or excessive questioning, or researching, or in this case, avoidance of going to confession. Almost certainly, she is going to also exhibit other symptoms of OCD. So some other areas are, there's fear of harming others or harming oneself. There's taboo fears, which are fears of doing something really inappropriate, especially of a sexual nature. There can be a kind of excessive ordering and rearranging. There can be this strange kind of symptom of things not feeling just right. I just need to adjust things like my clothes or my shoelaces until they feel exactly right. There can be superstitious fears. It's all kinds of different. So in this case, I would recommend seeking a professional who specializes in OCD, doing an OCD assessment, and then undergoing treatment for OCD. There is one gold standard treatment for OCD. It's very effective, more effective than medications. It's called exposure and response prevention, or ERP. So I would look for someone in your area who specializes in treating OCD using exposure and response prevention. Now, here's the tricky thing. When we're dealing with scrupulosity, because it overlaps so much with religious doctrine, it would be helpful to find someone who agrees with the Catholic teaching and with your values, because the treatment for OCD is exposure-based, meaning you face your fears, but we want to make sure that she's facing her fears in a way that doesn't violate moral boundaries. So that's why I specialize in modern psychology with traditional family values. Yeah. If you can find someone with that overlap in California, that would be best.
All right, Virginia, thank you for calling in. And you know what? This is not an uncommon problem, especially with today's adolescents. Right, Johann?
Yeah, I believe the current prevalence rate of OCD is 2% in the general population. So if you have 50 people in a room, one of them is going to meet the criteria for an OCD diagnosis. That
meets the diagnostic criteria, which is a pretty high bar. But you got an awful lot of people who struggle with some level of anxiety who just may not rise to the level of clinical level. Yeah, but still, right. They still lose sleep at night, and they still have some challenges. You can join me and listen on the Relevant Radio app, Marriage Unhindered, live each weekday at 5 p.m. Central Time.